In this video, we'll be looking at looping and control flow. How we create a loop that can loop through a whole series of cells, checking condition or pulling data out of a cell and putting it in somewhere else, and doing that sort of computation and the sort of control flow that we use with if statements and things like that. Very handy things that we use all the time in programming and software design, but allow us to create some quite unique and quite powerful behavior in our designs and in our macros. Now we'll look at doing some basic control flow, particularly with while loops and if statements, because with those two conditions we can basically control anything. So firstly, with some if statements, let's go with some basic if statements. If statements are in the form in Visual Basic, we say if a particular condition, so for example cell 1, 1, if that's greater than the value 0, we then say then, and we can make it do something. In this case, what we'll do is we'll change the color of it. So we'll make it red if it's greater than 0. We then say else, and we'll make it green if it's less than 0. And we say end if. So if we hit go, there's nothing in there at the moment because it's green. If we put a value in there, 5, we run it again, it's red because it's greater than 0. We put in -1, it'll be green again. So that's kind of what we're expecting. So that's the basics of if statements. Now if we want, and I like to do it, it's nice to put some brackets around the actual statement that we're dealing with, and normally we want to indent these as well, just so it's a bit more readable. It'll do exactly the same thing, but we need to make sure we have the then there, the else, and the end if to specify when it's starting and ending. Unfortunately, we can't use brackets in the same way that we would in C. Another little example associated with that, we'll write another one. If cells 1 and 2, if it's equal to test, then we'll have a message box pop up saying true. And in this case we won't have anything occurring if it's not equal to. So we'll hit go. It's obviously not equal to test, but we'll write test in here. We'll hit it again, and a message box pops up saying that it's true. So you'll notice there in our comparison we've used a single equals. That's what we use in Visual Basic. If we want to say not equals, we use this sort of command where we say our less than sign and our greater than sign. And so we run it again. Test is in there at the moment. We put something else in there. We run it again, and it pops up true. So we use either the single equals. If we use a double equals, it will give us an error, or we use the less than greater than signs together, and they'll give us our result. So a couple of examples there how we're using the if statement. We can also use the while statement, and I use the while statement a fair bit when I'm iterating through a series of cells. So how about we go through and define a variable. So dim row as integer, row is equal to 1, so it's equal to the first cell. We'll say while row is less than 10, and to end a while loop we say w end, or while end, and inside there we can do everything. So before we exit it, let's say row is equal to row plus 1, so we don't forget to have that and end up in an infinite loop while we're looping around. We'll say in there, what we'll do is we'll copy the cells from one location to another location. So cells, we'll say row, so we can use that to specify the row. We'll say into column 5 is where we're going to copy it. So we'll copy it from the first column to column 5. We'll hit go. We get that true occurring from before. And if we go back, we see whatever's in row 1 has been copied into column 5. Let's put a few more things in there. So you'll notice I've gone well beyond the 10 there. And we'll do something slightly more tricky. Rather than just saying row, we'll say row plus 3. So it will actually offset it by 3. We'll remove this condition here so that the message box doesn't pop up as it did before. We'll hit go, and then we'll see what we've got. We've been offset by 3, and we've done 9 of them, less than 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And there we go. The basis of using while loops and if statements. Now we can very easily not just control the row, but by declaring another variable up the top here, we can control the column as well. And so we can very easily get very sophisticated copying and pasting occurring and looping through things, iterating through lists by controlling the row and the column. One other thing that can be quite handy is rather than having to specify precisely when to stop, to programmatically do that, to work out when we've reached the end of our particular list, we stop at that point. When we can use the command isEmpty to determine if a cell is empty and have a little check on our while condition to do this. So let's start off by saying we'll declare our row. So our standard row variable, row equals 1. Then we say while is empty. We keep checking that row. Now while that's equal to false, it's not empty and we can do something. What we'll do is we'll copy a cell from one location to another location. So it just copies it from one spot to another. Remember, we need to increment our row. If we don't increment our row, what we'll end up with is an infinite loop that will just keep on looping. To break that, once we've gotten into it, we need to use the pause or break command on the keyboard. That allows us to pause it temporarily to allow us to stop the program and test what we're doing. So let's run a bit of code and see what happens. So we get everything that's copied over here to here. If we have a few other lines of code there, but have a break in there, if we run it again, we'll see that isEmpty wasn't true at this point, so I didn't fill those in. But if we put something in there, we can run it again and we'll see it fills down to the next time that isEmpty is not true.